Principal Assessor for Seagate, C-Risk, and CDIPSI. Thanks for having me, everyone.
Thank you, Estram.
Uh,
Hi to all. My name is Ehtiram Ismailov. I'm working as a partner in Information Risk Management department in KPMG Turkey. I am also serving as Vice President in İSAKA Istanbul chapter, and I'm very happy to be with you today.
Thank you, Estram. We're happy to have you here. Onur?
Hello, everyone. This is Onur Korucu. I'm joining today from Dublin, Ireland. It's not so hot in here. It's a little bit rainy, we can say. So it's total different environment, most probably. Oh, I'm a lawyer and engineer. I started my career in KPMG, PwC, that kind of professional services companies, and I joined Microsoft. I'm still working with Microsoft, but I've got different shareholders in different startup and scale-up companies. But my basic areas is privacy, security, AI governance. I am the chair of IEPP Dublin KnowledgeNet chapter. So I'm a bit stranger, maybe, the foreigner. This is whole ISACA environment, but I love ISACA, by the way.
We love to have sister chapters, so welcome the IAP. So, Turhan?
my name is Turhan Yükseliyor from ISAKA Ankara chapter. I have more than 30 years of experiences in various fields of INT, including governance, information security, privacy, risk management, operations, audit. I have been involved with ISACA since 2003, and I have served as a president, vice president, education chair, and certification director at ISACA Ankara chapter since 2012. I'm an accredited trainer for all core certifications as well as DTF, COVID, cybersecurity audit certificates. Thank you.
Thank you. Mehmet?
Hello everyone, merhabalar. My name is Mehmet Cüneyt Üvey. These people who are speaking are mostly my friends for the last 25 years. I've been involved with ISACA for the last 25 years and founding president of ISACA Ankara chapter, have been on the board of founding the Istanbul chapter, served as a president for ISACA South Florida. Now I'm a board member in ISACA New England. I got the accreditations for training as we worked together with Turhan in many steps in Ankara chapter. And I'm also working in the USA for the last 6 years. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mehmet. I really appreciate it. I forgot to talk about myself. So again, my name is Tall Guy Kızılelma. Tall guy like a short guy. I'm not that tall, but that's the pronunciation for our for foreign audiences. So I am the Sacramento, ISACA Sacramento chapter president. I'm involved with a lot of efforts, initiatives on different boards as a volunteer. Healthcare, higher education, state government experience is what I have. My focus really around education awareness training activities for the past 10 years now. Cybersecurity, information security is my focus, part of my full-time daytime job. But my real passion appeal is really education awareness activities, and that's why I love ISACA and what we do for our audience, for our global audience. And today we truly have a global audience, global speakers. So really appreciate it. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Mark, who's going to present about Digital Trust Ecosystem Framework, and then we'll switch to a panel format after his presentation. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you very much. Give me a second to get my screen shared up for you guys. And before we get into the panel discussion, of course, we want to talk a little bit about digital trust. And I want to give everybody a little background and insight into the creation of a framework. So I was very, very vocal in the past about trust because, and you're going to hear me say this multiple times, you can be secured, you can protect privacy, you can pass your audits, but if your customers don't trust you, they're going to leave you. So we started to look at this kind of this outcome of this, and I was having a lot of discussions with ISACA about the creation of this idea of digital trust, which is an outcome of good privacy, of good security, and of course of good compliance. So we started to really think about, the digital trust world or the digital arena right now. We're the next phase of digital transformation. And I believe that a true outcome of digital transformation is obviously security, privacy, but your customers trust you. My father said to me when I was a young man, he said, I trust somebody that I shake hands with. And today, digital trust is that digital version of a handshake with somebody. But there's a lot of pieces that are involved here in this whole idea of trust. Now, oftentimes we see there's some confusion between a lot of terms you see out there. We'll talk about this today in the panel. I get this question all the time. Hey, what's the difference between zero trust and digital trust? Because are we just creating some new buzzword out there that helps sell or create some new framework? And you all know we go through what's called framework overload. There are so many frameworks out there. We'll talk about those. One of my favorites, of course, is the DTEF by Isaka, as well as COBIT and several others out there. But let's talk about this intersection here between what we call digital trust and zero trust out there. So over on the left-hand side here, we have zero trust. Zero trust is a framework, some consider it a methodology, right? The whole idea here is don't trust anybody, okay? Until we prove they're trustworthy. When you look over on the right, we've got digital trust. It's confidence. It's an outcome of this. So digital trust cannot exist until zero trust is in place, kind of that whole idea. So what's that intersection, that piece right between where these two ideas or concepts kind of meet in the middle here? So let's take a look at a little bit at the difference between these. And of course, our panelists will talk about this in a little bit more depth as we move on. They're similar concepts, but zero trust basically is a framework based on never trust, always verify. It always verifies. So we're requiring strict verification of every user, every device that's attempting to access our resources, right? Where we've got this thing called digital trust. That's confidence, right? That's the confidence my stakeholders have in the integrity, security, reliability of my digital operations and my interactions. So I think that's important for us to really kind of hit that right off the bat as we're talking about this, because you can be secured, you can be compliant, but if your customers don't trust you, they're going to be that customer right there who's going to pack her bags and she's going to leave, right? And that's the whole idea, is that we need to link the whole idea of zero trust and digital trust. And we can do that. We're going to talk about this a little bit more today as we move on. So, as we look at this whole idea of zero trust and digital trust, right? So, digital trust principles. Again, not going to put you through a whole course on this, but basically assume a breach. We trust nobody until you prove yourself trustworthy, right? So, it's not implicit. We only provide the necessary access to users, devices, systems, and we enforce these granular permissions and controls. And we're always monitoring those kinds of things. Well, if you look at digital trust is an outcome. If we don't have zero trust, we can't have digital trust, right? It has things like integrity, guarding against improper information modification, security, the extent to which the information is accessible. You see the whole list. And I'm not going to go through each one of these. There's a lot of information out there that walks through each of those. And we're going to hit a couple of these today during our discussion in the panel. But here's the important part, is when you add zero trust and digital trust together, now you've got some real outcomes here. And I think the outcomes here are confidence, right? Confidence is really, it's fostering a sense of reliability, transparency, and it encourages my customers to engage more deeply, right? I think about my mother. My mother does not do anything online. In fact, a funny story for you is my mom, I gave her one of my laptops. I had a laptop. I gave my mom a laptop. It was a very expensive laptop because I'd upgraded mine. And I said, Mom, I can get you online. I can get you a Facebook account. We can like share information, emails. Well, that laptop became the most expensive solitaire game I've ever seen in my life. She never went online. All she did was play solitaire because she did not trust this thing called the internets. She called it the internets as in plural, right? So she had no trust. Now, my mom never went to an ATM. She only used checks. She only used cash. She only used checks to write and pay her bills. So my mom is not somebody who will ever trust anything. But what do we do to enhance that trust? Right? That's an important thing when we're talking about this. So, as an organization, of course, it will help us from compliance perspective, brand reputation, right? That's a big deal. Your trust can be diminished in a single minute. We'll talk about this coming up here in a few minutes. So, think of digital trust then as this complex puzzle, right? Every one of these pieces is a crucial element, including security, transparency, and oftentimes for most organizations, zero trust is that missing puzzle piece. But a lot of times we see people using trust. They throw trust out like it's crazy. So people like to throw trust at the end of a comment, and all of a sudden they're trusted. You got interpersonal trust, leadership trust, you name it, right? It's like the term governance. We like to throw governance in a term, and automatically governance just appears. Trust doesn't appear. What we want to talk about down here on the bottom left is what we call digital trust. So stay with me for a second because I'm gonna stretch your imagination a little bit. So there is not a widely adopted method in our industry to consistently measure digital trust. We're going to talk about the DTEF, of course, for MySaka, which is really, I think, is the leading publication around this. But there's no way to measure trust. Remember back in school when you, again, it depends on where you're from. You may have not had this rating, but you have this, you got your grades and you got an A, B, C, D, or F, assuming most people understand that. This theory of digital trust, where are you today? Well, let's take a look at this whole idea of digital trust. If I give you an A, that means there's high trust. I trust you. You're strong, you're established, you're an industry leader when it comes to trust. If I give you a grade of B, you're still passing, right? But you're reliable, you may be improving a little bit. Let's go to a C. C is technically a passing grade, but I'm a little bit skeptical. And if your trust is a D, warning, right? We're losing that trust. You're unstable. And if you are an F in digital trust, it's a failure. I will not use your organization. Okay. So let's take that whole idea of putting a grading scale to your digital trust. For you today, what grade would you give your organization? You don't have to answer me. Just think about it, right? Is there an event that could happen that could change that trust grade? Now, remember, one event can take you from an A to an F overnight. That's the whole idea. And when we created the DTEF, we had those things in mind. I love this cartoon that says, hey, we calibrated the trustometer, but it doesn't trust us back. Wouldn't it be nice if you could go out to Amazon.com and buy a tool like this that will automatically calibrate your trust level? Doesn't exist today. I could give you an A today. You could be a D tomorrow because of a negative newsworthy event. So let's take an example here. You all know these folks, Meta, right? So let's take a look at my personal journey with Meta and how I would rate their trust. So let's take a look at this. First, let's jump ahead here. So 2012 at the top of this table. In 2012, I joined Facebook. I trusted them. They had an A grade for me. It was the dominant social media platform. Only a few short years later, 2016, now all of a sudden in the US, we have a whole issue around fake news and the election concerns. They went from an A to a D literally in 4 short years. Okay. Well, here's what happens. They drop even further in 2018. You might remember the Cambridge Analytica scandal, right? Where now third parties are assessing private information. They moved up a little bit in 2020, a couple years later, right? So now we've got their efforts at fighting that whole idea of misinformation. They moved up in 2021, right? They that's when they moved to Meta from Facebook. It was, although it was a media play to increase some of the trust they had with their clients and customers, it was helpful for them. And then They came back down. We had a whistleblower that said, hey, you are actually using the engagement over well-being of our users. And then they come up a little bit. You get the idea, right? And then we come all the way to 2025, and now we see them come back down again. These are my ratings, by the way. These aren't industry ratings because there's not one that exists. There will be a lot of organizations that will tell you they give digital trust scores and their methodologies are flawed, and I'll tell you why here in just a few minutes. I think the ISACA's DTEF is probably the one area that you want to look at that will help you the most. So this is not an unusual question for me, right? In a board, hey, a board meeting or a committee, we've been asked to do digital trust. Now what do we do? Right? We've never heard of this thing. Well, first, I'd like to tell you that what I'd like for you to do is think of yourself as a digital consumer. Okay. You know this game here on the left. Do you remember when you played that as a child? Hopefully, you didn't play it as an adult very much, but you said, hey, I'm going to blindfold myself. I'm going to fall backwards. I trust you. I trust you to catch me. Hey, folks, as a consumer, don't play the game. Do not play the game of I trust you. There are things you need to do to be vigilant because think about this. Look at the video here on the left-hand side. This lady trusts these gentlemen to catch her. Look what happens. She got hurt. She trusted them and she got hurt. Let's take that one step further. Look at the video on the right. This guy trusts him. Not only does the guy falling backwards get hurt, but the guys who were supposed to catch him banged heads in the middle and they got hurt too. That's the whole idea. So, as a provider of a digital service, this should not be your strategy. Do not put your head in the sand. That looks a little bit like Arizona, where I am right now. Don't put your head in the sand and pretend like it doesn't exist. Because I'm telling you this, what's going to take place over the next couple of years is digital trust because you can be secured, you can protect privacy, you can pass your audits. But if your customers don't trust you, they're going to walk. Digital trust. Now, we see this in the headlines everywhere. A lot of things on digital trust. What was interesting is be careful because digital trust isn't just financial transactions only. I can lose trust in you because of a news headline, right? I can lose trust in you based on my last call with your help desk, service desk, or your call center. So ISACA, by the way, does an annual digital trust, state of digital trust report. I would highly suggest you go out and take a look at this every year. And matter of fact, many people on this call, you may have been a contributor to a lot of the information that we have in this digital trust report. I would go out and take a look at that. We're not going to go through the details of that. I just wanted you to be aware that exists. So now let's get into this thing called digital trust specifically. I will tell you this definition of digital trust, and I'm not saying this because I was one of the authors of this. I'm telling you this because it is one of the best overarching definitions I've seen. So any of you all that maybe have ever done any work, any volunteer work with ISACA. You know, ISACA loves, we get people from around the globe together when we do a lot of our work. Well, this definition right here, in a small group of about just around 10 people, experts from around the world, this definition, how long do you think it took for us, 10 experts from around the world, to all agree on one definition? 3 days. This definition, just this, was a 3-day discussion. Why? Because we dissected every single word. Number one, you see we have, let me go back. I'm trying to draw my screen. There we go. We have confidence in the integrity of our relationships. Notice we say interactions and transactions, right? It's not just a financial transaction. It might be a conversation between providers and consumers. A provider, somebody providing that digital service. A consumer is receiving that service. Now, we love the ecosystem piece. And of course, we have people, organization, process, and information technology. Bunch of key things in there. We wanted this definition to be broad enough to be able to be applicable and valuable to any type of organization. Look at it. You read that definition. You could be a for-profit, not-for-profit organization. You could be a government entity, NGO, right? You could be a political organization, a religious organization. It doesn't matter, right? This definition meets your needs. Now, let me ask you all a couple questions here. You don't have to answer it, but you can go out to chat if you'd like. So this first one, so I've got a couple of comments here. So this is US based. Here's an international hotel chain. They made front page news for multiple data breaches over the last 3 years, exposing personal information of their customers. Can anybody tell me who that might have been? Again, it's US based, but it's internationally known. Who is this company? Go out to chat. I'm keeping an eye on chat. Any ideas? All right, no takers. That, ladies and gentlemen, was Marriott. There you go. Tall guy got it. Tall guy got it. You've heard me tell the story before. Here's what's funny. I'm a I'm a huge Marriott fan. I have friends of mine who left Marriott at the first sign of distress and said, "We'll never go back to Marriott again. We don't trust them anymore." But why is it that I still trust Marriott? I liked how they handled their incident. Here's my next scenario. A top U.S. retailer, apologies for the U.S. focus here, loses 40 million credit and debit records and 70 million customer records from a Trojan horse malware. By the way, I was also a victim. I'll call myself a victim in this one. Anybody know who that is? It's U.S. Apologies for this. That, ladies and gentlemen, was Target. I was also exposed in the Target breach. Do I still trust Target? Nope. I have never gone to Target. They haven't received $1 of my money since that happened. Well, why is it that I still trust Marriott, but I don't trust Target? Marriott nailed me 3 times. Target did once. This is what we're talking about. Here's my third one. Some of you folks might remember this. This was a long time ago, actually, in digital world. Hackers breached an online web portal. 3 billion user accounts. I was actually in this one as well. That was, and Tall Guy says, the mother of all breaches. Guess what? If you don't know who that was Yahoo. I was actually involved in this one too. Do I still trust Yahoo? No, I don't. I'm not sure I've ever put YAH anything in my browser since that happened. I don't trust Target. I don't trust Yahoo, but I trust Marriott. Why? That is the idea of digital trust. Marriott figured out how to do this because they put these things called the elements of digital trust in. And again, the way they responded to those breaches was much better than the way Yahoo ever did and the way that Target ever did. But I'm not going to walk through each one of these, but the whole idea is that this whole thing of digital transformation, yes, we have to have integrity, we have to have security. We get it. Each one of these ingredients here. But remember, digital trust is an outcome of all these. So when someone says, oh, digital trust is trying to replace security, no, digital trust depends on security, depends on privacy, and depends on these pieces. So that's kind of the whole idea because a consumer is more likely to interact with a trustworthy company than one that is not. And these are those elements that help them decide whether to interact with a digital provider. Okay. So they may rely on marketing and the opinions of other, whether it's a conscious or an unconscious decision. But resulting things here are consumers often believe they're using the most reliable providers, products, and services. All right. So let's move on. Let's talk about this idea of a digital trust network. We'll jump into this a little bit more. And this is the core foundation of ISACA's digital trust ecosystem framework. So we have relationship mediums. This is interesting. You and I may trust each other, but we might not trust the technology between us. My son lived in China for a couple years, okay? And before he left for China, he said, "Dad, He said, we talk on the phone, we talk through all these chat mechanisms and so on. He says, but just as long as you know, while I'm in China, there is only one way you and I can communicate, and that's through a tool called WeChat, which is common. If you don't know, WeChat is commonly known to be a heavily monitored chat mechanism out of China. And he said, anything we say on WeChat will be exposed somehow. Somebody will be watching that. I trusted my son and I trusted the communication between us, but I didn't trust the technology, right? So there's a lot of those pieces on relationship mediums that sit in between us. Of course, our relationships, we'll talk about those here in a few minutes. We have digital trust activities, we have our stakeholders, and then, of course, we have the ethics, the reputation, and the privacy. Stay with me. We'll be done here in a few minutes. I have a couple more examples that I want to share with you. So we have these relationships. Now, first, remember, we saw in the definition of digital trust, we have a service provider and a service consumer, right? So that service provider is that role that's providing a digital service. It might also include a product. Then we have a consumer. That consumer is somebody who's receiving that digital service. All right, got it. Right between us is that what I call a proxy technology. I may trust you, you may trust me, but we don't trust the tool between us. That has a lot to do with it. Now, we've got a couple other parts of this relationship down below. We may have third party. Here's what's interesting. When we were developing the DTEF, it's not just third party. Remember, you have a digital supply chain. It's third party, fourth party, fifth party, sixth, seventh, eighth, and ninth. Because you may have a vulnerability in your supply chain that's 4 or 5 generations away from you, and that vulnerability is so small. They're a small company. It might be me, Mark Thomas in Phoenix, Arizona. I'm a one person company. And let's say I'm in your digital supply chain. Guess what? Because I'm a one person company in Arizona, I do not, the only law or requirement I have is I need to pay my taxes every year. I'm not part of PCI DSS. I'm not under the jurisdiction of GDPR or any privacy act. I don't have to worry about DORA. I don't have to worry about any of those, right? So I may be your biggest vulnerability. And then, of course, we have our digital peers. That's my son and I talking to each other from a peer-to-peer perspective. So those relationships, I'm going to take it one step further. I know there's a lot of data here, but don't worry, we'll go very, very quickly. So we may have a business to consumer, right? Where the bank engages with a banking customer depositing a personal check. May have business to business trust. I may outsource a service to those organizations. We may have business to employ. Business to employ. Think about it. I have payroll data about you. Do you trust that I'm protecting that data? Business to government or government to business. I submit my tax statements every year. Do I trust my government to protect my business information? And then we have government to constituent, the person or persons who are part of the legal parameters of that governance system. They're collecting voting information. Do I trust that? I'm not going to get into that in the USA because we've had all kinds of issues with people not trusting the electronic voting systems. And they always find a way to say, I don't trust it. I get it. And then finally, we have that peer-to-peer piece. Two friends are messaging via WhatsApp and personal relationship matters. Do you trust? You may trust that person, but do you trust the technology between you? So that takes us to the whole idea of why we built this thing called the Digital Trust Ecosystem Framework, or DTEF. This thing starts off at a very top level. We call them nodes. Those are the big circles there. So let's talk a little bit about the nodes real quick. All right. So, of course, no surprises there. We've got people, process, technology, but we added one more. The people side of this really talks about the knowledge, the skills, the abilities, and the talents of those folks that we need to have digital trust. The process. A lot of other frameworks out there provide processes for us. Then we have the technology, of course, which is a huge factor when we're talking about digital trust. And then we have organization, those structures. Do we have levels of authority, delegations of authority? Do we have things like escalation procedures and so on? But the real meat of this framework are these what we first called them tensions, right? Because what they're doing is they're connecting each one of these nodes and they're called domains. This is the top level of what we call the digital trust ecosystem framework. So, culture, right? What are those pieces we need to have in place in order to support a digital trust culture? Human factors, if you think about that human to technology interface. Emergence, under emergence, think about this as kind of the continual improvement and innovation section. Enabling and support, that's good old fashioned operations where we're talking about incident management, problem management, supporting those services. My personal favorite, direct and monitor, you know what that is? That is governance. And then finally, architecture, how we put these things together. So recognize those four domains or those tensions between those nodes, and that takes us to the digital trust ecosystem framework. Folks, what you're looking at right here are what we call trust factors. Okay? If you're looking at this from a COBIT lens, you're looking at something called governance and management objectives. If you are an auditor, each one of these trust factors is what you might consider a what? Control objective. So we designed this to have utility for any type of role, whether you're running a process or whether you're auditing a process or you're governing or managing that. Each one of these makes the most sense. So again, you might notice it says culture here, emergence. Those are those tensions or those connectors we had between those nodes. And under each one of those are what we call trust factors. By the way, every one of those trust factors is further broken down into a lot of detail. I'm not going to go into it here because I want to get to the discussion with everybody, but you can see there's a lot of depth and a lot of things that we've actually put into this whole framework to be helpful for you. You can find those on isaka.org now. There's a lot of documents out there from an ISACA perspective. This is my ISACA hat. Okay. We have the digital trust ecosystem framework. We have actually a short course actually designed out there. We have what's called the board briefing on digital trust. We have the interactive guide, we have the implementation guide, and we've got the foundation certificate. I'm gonna actually, Tall Guy, I'm gonna call you out. If I remember correctly, you just taught a DTEP foundation course within the last couple of weeks. Is that correct?
That's right. Because I really think, as you kind of go over the topics, this is a really a very, very, valuable, important topic. And going forward, the importance of it is only going to grow. So yes, we did start the learning training aspects around digital trust. I really want to emphasize and bring this to our global audience's attention. And actually, with that, we are going to have one. I will be doing COVID free trainings globally to our audience September, November, October, COVID Foundation Design Implementation and NIST. And in December, we will, under ISACA Sacramento, do another digital trust ecosystem framework training, which also, of course, will be free global audience. Thank you.
Nice. And matter of fact, I do know Turhan. Turhan, you are also a certified instructor for DTEP. Is that correct? I think you're on mute, brother. Turhan, you're on mute.
Is that okay now?
There we go. Gotcha now. Go for it.
Okay. Yes, I am the accredited trainer for APMG. From the APMG, I'm the accredited trainer for DTEF, as well as COBIT and the core certifications of the ISECA already.
Very cool.
Actually, I didn't have chance to give any digital trust training yet. I'm hoping to give one in the future.
Yep. It would be nice. I'm starting to see a little bit of increase in a lot of the training courses coming out there. I'm embarrassed that I don't know of our other panelists. I do know that Tall Guy and Turhan are trainer certified for DTEF. If anybody else is, chime in because I'm embarrassed that I didn't know if anybody else was. If not, I'll move on. All right. So, you want more information on this thing called digital trust? I'm closing up, and we're going to go to a discussion next with global professionals about this idea of digital trust and zero trust. Go out to the digital trust site out on the ISACA site, and everything you need to know is out there. I'm telling you, ladies and gentlemen, if you I'm assuming if you're on this call, you're an ISACA member, but if you are interested in digital trust, I am telling you this that ISACA right now is the global leader when it comes to digital trust. We have the best framework, we have the best information, and we have the top professionals that are doing this thing called digital trust around the globe. Thank you very much for your kind attention, tall guy. I'm going to throw it back to you, and we can get some of these professionals involved in the conversation. So, all right, I'm
Great.
going to stop sharing now. It goes back to you, sir.
Well, thank you very much, Mark. I really appreciate this detailed coverage about digital trust ecosystem framework. And about these, events and conferences, especially after COVID, right? COVID-19, we come together online, meet together wherever we are globally. There are obviously a lot of benefits, right? We learn as part of the ongoing, learning effort. But guess what? We also find out about our friends that we, used to work with. I just saw one of my close friends that I used to work with. I'm not gonna embarrass him, but I just say hi to Tolga and let's keep in touch. Anyway, after 30 years in the audience. So, with that, let's go ahead and start our panel. What I like to do is really go through a list of questions, and I'm sure you have questions about the topic yourself. So, please put them in the chat as we're going to go through them, and we will address them as we have time towards the end or if it is relevant to the question being asked. So, I'm going to start with Turhan. As you know, there's a lot of chatter about digital trust these days online. Mark kind of mentioned about this, the whole trend, and it's really important. But most posts and comments, they focus on the trust between customers and companies with respect to financial transactions. Is digital trust more than simply financial transactions? Is there more to it, Tron?
Thank you. Uh, Before answering your question, it's necessary to know that what digital trust is and what constitutes the digital trust network. Digital transformation integrates digital technology and information into all business areas, fundamentally changing how they operate and deliver value to the stakeholders. Digital trust is a core component of the genesis of an enterprise digital transformation. So digital trust is the confidence in the integrity of the relationships, interactions, and transactions among the providers and their stakeholders within an associated digital ecosystem. Digital trust definition emphasizes relationships, interactions, transactions, and encompassing different situations and exchange frequencies. Relationships are generally ongoing, while transactions and the interactions may be one-time events. So, um, when we talk about the digital trust network elements, which includes type of relationships established between the parties, as Mark said, B2P, internal, external, B2C, B2E, government to government, B to government, peer to peer. Then there is another element, type of relationship media used during this transaction and relations, such as via website, via API, via email system, via financial transactions, via proxy technologies. Then there are parties, stakeholders involved in these interactions, relations, and the transaction, which consist of providers, customers, third parties, digital peers, regulators, customers, employees. Finally, the activities involved in these interactions and relations, which has digital identities, behaviors, which then we have digital connections, digital communications, digital interactions, digital transactions. Uh, Finally, we have digital trust relationships interactions and the transaction not only limited to financial transaction, it also includes for instance, in B2B, they are mostly financial and business triggering events, purchasing data from a search company, outsourcing processes, for instance, paying a consultancy payment for penetration testing service, for instance. In B2C, they are related to financial and authorization service usage, purchasing, how signing a loan documents, using food delivery services. In B2E, executing and filing employees' evaluation reports, processing payrolls, of onboarding and offboarding employees in an organization. In B2G, submitting an annual business processing report online, participating in a mutual audit. In government to government, providing video conferencing and web services to the government entities, accessing shared information system to reduce crime, etc. So in peer-to-peer, transferring money, commenting on a social media post, sending an email to a friend. So there are a lot of transactions, relations, communications between the parties. So in summary, any type of information which is shared between the entities in the digital trust, financial, privacy information, intellectual property, confidential info, publicly available data, signatures, seals, approvals, preferences, locations, behaviors, metadata, they are all connected to the digital trust. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you very much. I think the definition, right? The confidence that we have in the integrity, relationships, transactions, interactions, that itself, I think, kind of provides a degree of answer. I just, again, just want to make sure if any other comments, please feel free to. If no comments, I'm going to move on to our next.
Just kind of one kind of follow-up to that. Turan basically defined it perfectly to operationalize this. So a year ago when we did our ISACA annual conference here in Phoenix, where I live, I was with a bunch of ISACA folks and we were going to go out for dinner and some drinks. So we took a ride on something called Waymo. I'm not sure if you all are familiar with Waymo. We have them everywhere here in Phoenix. It's a driverless car. Okay. So as Turan was talking about trust and the pieces that come with this is I had to trust in ride sharing, which meant it wasn't just about processing the payment. I was less concerned about the financial transaction than I was the actual ride that was driven by technology. I had to trust the entire digital experience. I had to trust the algorithm, right? I had to trust privacy. I had to trust my safety, transparency, and those things. In fact, what was interesting is one of the Osaka employees was sitting in the back seat. She did not put her seatbelt on. And the vehicle said, "We are not driving until the passenger in that seat puts their seat belt on." I'm like, wow. I completely trust the financial transaction. I was a little cautious at first, but now I actually trust this interaction. Anyway, I thought I'd throw that in, and Turhan really kind of nailed that one. And if anybody else has any other examples, I don't mean to steal the show on that one, but that's a good example.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a good example. So let's move on. We have many other topics to cover, and we have roughly less than an hour. And I also want to make sure we have enough time for any questions. Please feel free to put it in the chat. So next question, Ehram, this is for you. Again, it's about the digital trust versus zero trust, right? There's a bit of a confusion between the two. What is the difference?
Okay, Tolga, yes, you're right. There is actually confusion between them. And also we can look from that perspective after Mark's actually slide that he has shown, I think the confusion has gone, but I will try to detail this, okay? So when we look from the point, first of all, the zero trust is something that we can fundamentally differ from zero trust and digital trust because each addressing actually different aspect of cybersecurity and business relations and the trust side of relationships, and the interactions that the panelists have stated until now. So when we look our connected world where everything is online, the traditional boundaries are no longer apply, and also the Waymo example that Mark has just shared with us. But as the lines are just blurring and we are online constantly, then we need the trust side much more than ever. But in order to be sure, then we have to look at the key principles and the focuses of zero trust is putting on and digital trust is trying to define. So for security framework side, the zero trust side, we assume that no user or system inside or outside the organization or the network, it should not be trusted by default. So the key principle is, as we have just shared, never trust, always verify. The core element is verification for every user, every device, and every entity that is trying to connect to our, let's say, data, to our organization, to our network. And the continuous monitoring and validation of user behavior and access is also one of the core elements related to zero trust side. But when we come to the digital trust side, it is a broader business concept that have been shared until now. And it is in that broader concept, I think the confidence that has already shared, and Waymo example is a great example, that after seeing the confidence in the algorithm, in the control that you have stated the interaction with, then you build that trust and you go over that in a, let's say, digital trust framework. So the key dimensions when we look from digital trust side is security privacy side. The ethical use is important here. So when we look at from focus of the zero trust, it is much more a cybersecurity framework, being multi-factor authentication or single sign-on, all the concepts like this. But when we look from digital trust side, the definition for that, it is organizational reputation in the digital space. And when we look at the case here, I want to also put an emphasis on the marketing side, because zero trust, all we know that in a zero trust concept, it is a bit negative. I don't know, Mark, if you are agree with me or not, but when we say zero trust, when we say digital trust, it's much more softer and warmer. You
I think
want
it
to,
makes sense. It really
yeah,
does.
yeah. You want to make a hug with digital trust, but when I said zero trust, it is something being negative in concept. And we are talking about interactions, we are talking about collaboration, we are talking about all those cases. But when putting a zero trust in the head of those, let's say, concepts, it looks like a negative. So maybe a good, much more better naming for zero trust would be possible in the future. I don't know.
I think you're right. Because digital trust is the goal, right?
Yes.
Zero trust is a strategy to
Yes.
get there. I think I think you explained it perfectly. I love it. I love it.
We all know that beforehand we say that trust but verify, okay? But right now we say don't trust and always verify. So the concept has gone from that continuum to the point that we are just now talking about. So it also shows us the frameworks and the digitalization concepts ending at a point that we are in a point that we need to monitor. We need to see all those interactions with zero trust principle in order to be sure that even if in your presentation you have also stated the being in a position that always assume that there would be a breach, okay? That would make you, because we are living in an environment where the successful organizations, successful people are the ones who do not know everything, but who tries much more than others, okay? So trying and doing a practice is another concept related to zero trust one. And also, it is one of the fundamental concepts of digital trust framework, in my opinion.
It's one of the best descriptions I've ever heard in my life, man. That actually helped me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Because I know you do this for a living,
Yeah.
right? I don't do zero trust for a living. I do
Yes.
digital trust. Man, that was,
Yes.
I'm telling you, that was huge. I wish I could have recorded that and quoted you and put that on LinkedIn. I'm telling you, that was great. Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you. Thank you.
It's gonna be this is recording, Mark. It's gonna be
Oh, it is
available.
being recorded. That's a
Yeah,
soundbite. You need to take that one.
available.
That was good.
Definitely. But I think you made a great point about the evolution, right? From trust to don't trust. I think that's
Yes.
great emphasis. And as we move forward, obviously technology, moving rapidly, things changing. We didn't have to deal with, AI, well, generative AI 2, 3 years ago or so. Now it's all common stream, and we get used to these things. But essentially, how do we always, keep a focused, eye on making things right, doing secure privacy, addressing all the elements. And I think that's really where digital trust shines. That's a bigger umbrella,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
About all these things. And zero trust, as you mentioned, Mark
Mhm.
mentioned, is one of the fundamental elements required, a core pillar to achieve that trust, digital trust. Great. Onur, let's talk about the global perspective and the regulatory environments. So how does digital trust vary across different regions or regulatory environments? Because at the end of the day, I mean, we used to say during the internet time, it's a global village, right, that we live in. So the globalization aspect, things, no boundaries and borders. What do you think about the regulatory and different regions and how digital trust vary?
Yeah, so I really like to talk about kind of geopolitical difference between legislation and innovation and something, but I just want to add something more. Antron made a perfect speech, but just one thing, because I'm coming from cybersecurity background and cybersecurity always my first love. So zero trust is coming from security areas. So that is why we are really low. It means that don't trust anything. So maybe you remember that saying from Carl Sagan. He's saying, I don't want to believe, I want to understand you. So don't believe in something without understanding it. So that is why zero trust is a perfect, I don't know, maybe description for cybersecurity. But on the other hand, digital trust, it's a really hard topic, not just for privacy, not just for security, it's for everything right now. Because in professional services, in corporate companies, in small size companies, all of them just using digital trust for some different reasons, that kind of description. But you know what? Digital trust isn't a one size fits all concept. It's shaped by a region's legal frameworks, needs, understanding, mindsets, cultural exceptions, and a level of digital maturity. So that is why every day we are just talking about what is new things that's coming into legislations and the frameworks. So there is a big dilemma right now because when we talk about AI, especially lawyers really love to emphasize, highlight new things on the legislations. But we need to remember that law is not innovation. Tech is innovation. With law, we just try to create a good frame and just try to give the trust people. So let's compare EU, US, Turkey together. I think lots of things happen, not just this year. Since last year was a drama show around the world. So if we touch in other, continents, in I think we can start with EU because I'm in Dublin, so EU is my area. So in the EU, digital trust is deeply embedded in regulation first thinking. GDPR was a great example for that. It prioritizes data protection, transparency, and of course, increasing the trust. It is built through compliance with clear, maybe we can say enforceable rights. So it's basically built on human rights mindset. So, but I just mentioned that GDPR was a great example. But you know what? In EU, we are discussing if we can change something in GDPR too. So we now see that same trend with AI Act, which again prioritizes these risk mitigation and human-centric innovation. Trust in this consent context is based on control and accountability. maybe we can say liability too. I'm just putting in a asterisk for that because I will try to explain something for liability perspective. And with AI Act just entering a critical phase in August, because at the beginning of this month, 2nd of August, the obligations for general purposes AI models like ChatGPT 4 or Google Gemini will start applying. So these obligations fall not on users, they securely on the model developers. So think about that. They just try to blame for everything to creators, not people, not end users, not distributors, the creators. You know what? I think this is the point right now, because maybe you remember, despite this progress, we also saw some pushback at the Paris AI Summit earlier this year. J.D. Vane strongly criticized Europe's AI governance approach, calling it bureaucratic overreach. And interestingly, just a few weeks later, the EU quietly softened parts of liability directive, a subtle but telling shift that highlights how geopolitical pressure, economic concerns, and global AI competitions and influencing even most right-centering region. So it means that they choose like tech giants over people rights. So we just watch them. You know what? I think this is the biggest dilemma in the AI history right now, because as EU, we are lawmakers and we just trying to put our hands up with our laws and legislations and that kind of ruler ideas. But after all, suddenly we lost our hands. So I think it was a perfect and maybe we can say unforgettable moment for AI history. And if we look at from US, where digital rights is often framed through the lens national security and economic leadership, and the approach is more market driven and innovation first. You know what? At the beginning of everything, I love that mindset, because as an engineer, I always want to see what is more innovation, what will coming in the next. But as a lawyer, oh my God, it's really scary right now, because digital trust is largely tied to brand reputation, security posture, and how companies handle breaches and ethical lapses. So we talk about, I just mentioned that ethics. So this is the magical word right now in AI area. In EU, when they didn't publish, we really waited very long time to understand what is going on AI side. Maybe you remember from World Economic Forum's conferences, they cried together and said, please stop this innovation for 6 months. We are not ready. We are not there. Maybe you remember that speech in World Economic Forums. And after all, they published not so perfect, unmature act to us. But right now, these kind of ethical problems causes the things like, for example, hallucination and data modification and the misunderstanding information. So Mark showed something on, I didn't remember which slides, but talk about Cambridge Analytica. Cambridge Analytica was the grandfather of that kind of problems. And I'm an alumni, University of Cambridge, so I remember our first lessons. They lectured us. Do you remember Cambridge Analytica? Yeah, of course, everybody remembers it. And right now, they're enhancing it. It's evolving every day. And maybe we can say, in US, while we are seeing stronger frameworks emerging like NIST AI risk management framework, the emphasis is still guidelines rather than prospective laws, trust here earned through performance and transparency, often after the fact. So maybe recent winning AI race kind of action plan is a clear pivot, because US narrative position AI in strategic battlegrounds, they're calling that, focusing on speed, focusing on market dominance, often the expense of privacy, or maybe we can say ethical alignment. So maybe we can give a perfect example, because I think everybody heard about that, this kiss cam controversy. in the US recently sparkled global attention when France discovered AI facial recognition was being used during the live supporting events without consent. In Europe, this would have triggered immediate regulatory investigations, but in US, it became a PR issue, not a legal one. This is the difference between US and EU. And this perfectly illustrates how digital trust and what is considered a breach of it and interpreted, maybe we can say, very differently depending on your regulatory lens. So think about that. If that people are not citizens of US, if they are European citizens, think about that. What we'll talk about today. Total different kind of situations will happen most probably, and we will see lots of international cases between US and EU. And let's turn our face in other continent. Contrast with that, China, which has released its AI Global Governance Action Plan, a document that appears, maybe we can say, carries deep geopolitical intent. It aligned with UN development goals. It means that China approach to digital trust rooted to state authority, and they're just switching their roles because maybe you remember at the beginning this year we talked about DeepSeek example, and we called it this Sputnik moment for AI world. And you know what? We always, remember everything from US. This is the freedom world. Everything, everybody, whatever, all the things is free in US. You know what? They are switching their roles. China just mentioned that this is open source. You can do whatever you want. And US guys just mentioned that, no, stop it. We don't want to see you in our markets. So it was a total drama show in AI world. So maybe we can say in EU, as ever finds itself navigating between these two poles, its digital sovereignty projects, while slower, is value-driven. For instance, we can say even training data for AI models developed outside the EU must comply with EU law if the model is used within Europe. Yet the principle stands is not without friction. But think about that. Ironically, these days, the European accountability might stifle innovation, and the trust is a balancing act between rights and growth, transparency and pragmatism. The biggest question. So, in this context, again, digital trust becomes deeply cultural and political. If we turn our face to Turkey, maybe we can say something about Turkey because we've got lots of audience from Turkey too. While it has aligned many laws within the EU, accuse, especially in data protection law, of course, it's so emphasizing with GDPR, inspired by GDPR, we can say. Turkey's digital trust ecosystem faces distinct pressure, mostly rooted to geopolitical position and the security realities. Because it's a perfect example. In Europe, we are not facing that kind of very strong and very sharp security problems in here. So lots of hackers can call themselves they are perfect hackers because they can use just Kali and something. But in Turkey, every day they are facing with very sharp, very bold, and evolving security problems. And again, I am saying this is a cultural understanding. So maybe we can say in Turkey, this shaped by persistent cross-border threats, regional instability, and nation-level level attacks. It's shaping total different kind of stage in Turkey. So privacy isn't yet embedded in cultural expectations, but rather than seen through, maybe we can say, the lens of compliance and organizational reputation. However, there is a fast-growing cybersecurity ecosystem in the public. It's becoming data sovereignty, we can say. So that kind of countries, Turkey kind of countries, need to be so careful, understand what is valuable for themselves, because the population is great in Turkey, and in Turkey they're collecting perfect amount of data. So profiling and understanding that kind of population means a lot for the technological companies, or we can say maybe the tech giants. So I think they need to understand that kind of landscapes in Turkey. Maybe if they can understand their value, maybe they can shape their future perfectly. So this
That's
landscape, oh, sorry.
So this is a great topic discussion. Again, the different perspectives, the global perspectives, I think between among US and EU and Turkey kind of again has its own position. But the global perspective, every country region has their own priorities, obviously.
Yes.
But I think on a global scale, understanding what digital trust is really what matters, how we can use it for our own context, for our own organization, for our own industry really is the key, I think, question. So I know we have lots to cover, Onur, I apologize. I like to move forward with the next question. I want to make sure we can cover the other questions as much as possible. So this is for Mehmet. ISACA has recently published this framework on digital trust ecosystem framework, DTAP. So can you, and some people, they're wondering, what is this? What is the benefit? What is the value? So can you walk through the value of adopting this framework for an organization? Mehmet?
Awesome. Thank you very much. There is no better day than today to discuss digital trust with all these great speakers and the audience and our focus group. There is no better than today. I know we are facing a lot of challenges as you know, the digital transformation is going on. So I'm not going to talk about the whole framework, the theoretical information, this and that. I'm just going to give it a minute with 5 different value in like major points, because DTEF helps organization building trust in a world where everything is connected, systems, people, data, all kinds of things. And the value is like it gives structure to do something like which is abstract. Digital trust sounds very broad, but DTEF breaks it into clear areas like security, privacy, governance, and risk. And DTEF is not just for IT. It's everyone's job in an organization, everyone's job in a country, everyone's job in a government, everyone's job from leadership to operations, that the whole world should be aligned. I am a big fan of DTEF, as I was a big fan of COVID. I'm going to come to that point a little later. The third point is that it helps you measure where you stand. DTEF includes maturity levels, so you can see where you are, you can compare, you can go and improve over time. It supports a long-term strategy because digital trust affects your brand, customer relationships, and growth, your credibility as a government, your credibility as a healthcare, everything. I'm stressing upon government a little bit. I'm a straightforward person. So this framework helps you manage trust in a consistent way, not just react when something goes wrong. I would like to remind you a very good Turkish proverb or Turkish saying. It says, one disaster is better than 1,000 recommendations. Bir nasihat bin musibetten iyidir. Veya bir musibet bin nasihattan iyidir. Hemen tercüme. But this is so important. You have to be proactive. It's flexible as the 5th point, where you're in finance, in government, in healthcare or tech, small or large, you can adapt the framework to your needs. So adapting DTEF helps organizations build real, measurable trust with their customers, partners, employees, and citizens, and do it in a structured, scalable way in a digital world. I would like to finish this theoretical part and give you a couple of examples. I am one of the persons who had the privilege, the luck, I don't know what it came, but to implement COVID in Turkey for the first time. And I did it in a big, large IT organization of a bank. Then I had the privilege to give COVID as IT governance classes in 5 different great universities in Turkey as a graduate class. Then something happened right there in the banking system. There was a GS something from a bank, and Turkey has been the first country that implemented COVID and put it in their laws uh, as a standard to be implemented in all the banks and to be audited through the independent auditors. We are at a stage today, for the last 3 months, for the last 5 years, whatever, where DTEF is a great tool starting from the top to the bottom of the whole digital world, especially in our country, because you said you're a Cambridge graduate. Yeah, I got this yesterday from Cambridge. This is great. I paid a couple of dollars, but you know what I mean. So I am stopping my speech right now. Today is a very important day to understand DTEF and to implement it in my country and worldwide, to make sure that we trust everything, everyone in this whole digital ecosystem. Thank you.
Mehmet,
Uh,
I agree with you. When we looked at the DTEF, we kind of was thinking about this architectural blueprint, right? And it's holistic. There's no silos in this. It clarifies accountability, it clarifies structure, and it kind of bridges this whole idea of strategy and operations. Again, the whole idea was, what's the outcome? And you've said this. Odur said this. Ithrinson said this. It's the outcome of everything we do. And Turan actually said this. It's the outcome, and that's the whole idea of what the framework did.
Great. Well, since Mehmet mentioned, I think this is something I definitely have to share. Let me know if you see my screen. So again, it's about the trust, right? But just in case.
I love
So
it.
yeah, it's really about the benefits about the security, risk management, performance, right? Improved business performance, alignment. We talk about strategies, regulations, and standards. More importantly, strengthening the stakeholder, the relationship. So again, much to talk about, but I just wanted to share that image. So our next question goes for Turhan. Um, yeah, we've been talking about the digital trust, but what else is out there other than ISACA's framework on this issue? Like other frameworks, standards, regulatory environments related to adopting digital trust. What do you think, Farhan? You're muted, Farhan.
Unmute. It's okay now? Okay.
Yes, it's okay. Go
First
ahead.
of all, ISACA DTF has been introduced in late 2022. I remember it was, I think, in December. And at that time, there were several diverse frameworks and standards in the market which influenced the DTF. However, DTF is not intended to supersede any frameworks or standard, but instead work in conjunction with them. So DTF is working with the other standards in the market or frameworks or regulatory requirements, principles in the market. They work together. DTF refers to the other frameworks, standards, models, or principles when adopting digital trust in an organization. ISACA designed the DTF to have the native flexibility to adapt to most standards currently in use in the enterprise and can be used in conjunction with the other frameworks, models, and standards. If an enterprise currently uses a COBIT or ISO 38500 for establishing the governance processes, or enterprise can still use it. What distinguishes the ISACA DTF from the other frameworks, standards, and the model is that DTF is most comprehensive and focused on digital trust as a standalone concept. Currently available framework standards and models on the market are in especially related to the direct and monitor domain of the DTF, which is the governance part. For example, the NIST publications helps improve trust in the security and the privacy of the systems and the infrastructure by providing guidance and technology for their development. World Economic Forum digital trust framework also exists, and which is first published on the November 2020, defines dimensions against the trustworthiness of the digital technologies with dimensions like cybersecurity, safety, transparency, interoperability, auditability, redressability, solutions against the negative caused by technologies, fairness, and privacy. Some other frameworks and the standards that support the DTF are security, building security in maturity model, Center of Information Security Critical Security Controls, which consists of some of the security benchmarks, COBIT, of course, ISACA COBIT, Information and Technology Governance and Management Framework, set of COSO. COSO is Enterprise Risk Management Framework, and Integral Internal Control Integrated Framework. Also, we have 31,000 risk management guidelines or standards, as well as we have series of 27 case standards, information security management system. Also, we have 38,500 information governance framework for the organization. We can use cloud security, aliens cloud security matrix, as well as we can use NIST publications, risk management, special publication related to the privacy. We can use OWASP, Open Web Application Security Projects. We can also use OECD principles on corporate governance, Risk IT framework, which has been ISACA Risk IT framework, second edition. We can use TOGAF, Enterprise Architecture Framework, as well as SIFIA, which is the Scales Framework of Information Age. So there are plenty out there. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. So as you mentioned, there are a lot of standards and frameworks and best guides practices out there. And I think digital trust aligns well with all these out there. And I think that's a very important point to keep in mind.
When we adopt the DTF, when we look at the activities to adopt the DTF in an organization, we look at the activities, and in the activities, it refers to these frameworks and standards and principles. So it doesn't replace them, it supports them.
Exactly.
The organization can still use them.
That's right. That's a great point. Obviously, we don't want to replace. Then that's why the alignment. And of course, every organization is different, industry. The context is different. That's why from all these standards, frameworks out there, we just need to pick the one that works for the organization, for your context, industry, and also do that alignment, which is really important. It's really not about replacing, but supporting, working together, and for the one that works for you through adjusting and tailoring. So let's move forward. The next question I have is for Mehmet. So many organizations, we hear about this, and this goes for AI to a certain degree, but focus on the digital trust. They have this wait and see approach to these different ideas. I mean, why should an organization consider looking into digital trust and right now, for example?
Thank you very much again. Again, 5 points. Simple, straightforward, and short. With digital trust, this wait-and-see approach fails. That's what I'm telling. We should act now. Waiting costs more than acting early. The reason is, first, the trust drives business. Not only like in business, like sales, marketing, this and that, all kinds of business, business to business, business to government, government to consumers or the citizens and all that. People want to work with companies that they can trust. People want to live in countries that they trust. People want to do everything with trust. Everything got digital. So with their money, with their privacy, with their education and all that. It protects your reputation is the second case, or the second reason to consider digital trust implementation. One data breach or scandal can cause a lot of lasting damages. Uh, as I have mentioned, it's always late to react, but to be proactive is more important. Trust is very hard to earn, so easy to lose, like that. You remember Mark's speech about like A, B, C, D, E, F? When you are at F, anything you do is going to shine up to climb up, when you are at F. So even if you are in the worst case, in the worst situation, anything you do small is going to shine up and going to be example for the future steps. The third one is regulations are growing. As you have guys always mentioned, compliance is a big issue, privacy and security laws. And, also you have to be proactive to stay compliant and avoid all kinds of penalties. The fourth one is it gives you a competitive edge, plus sort of resilience. Companies that focus on digital trust, they stand out. It becomes a differentiator, not just a defense. So everyone gave like hotel or some sort of like service providers as examples. I'm talking about from top to bottom, from the whole world, from the whole countries and all that standpoint. Governments and ministries and all that also are important. Defense companies, all of them are so important to build trust. Because resilience, the fifth dimension, is something that can be broken in seconds, as I have mentioned. When your systems, when your people, people is the key, and your
Yeah.
processes are trusted, you are more prepared to handle disruptions and bounce back all kinds of attacks, all kinds of disruptions. So rather than waiting, it makes sense to start implementing digital trust, to start small maybe, but start now and build trust as a core part of your strategy.
Thank
Thank you. This is it.
Thank you, Mehmet. You're definitely right. I think being proactive really does make sense, and time is now for all the right reasons moving forward. So let's move forward. As I mentioned about AI, so much maybe hype or reality. Onur, what do you think? Is there a connection between AI and digital trust? Very high level, briefly.
Yeah, Tolga, actually, I just want to mention that Mehmet just mentioned that people is the key. No worries about that, Mehmet. Most probably we will get rid of all people with AI. They will just try to find something like AI overestimate us. So no worries about that. So Tolga, my answer is AI and digital trust are inseparable. But you know what? I think AI and anything is right now is inseparable because everything is all this technology sector, maybe in our daily life, in the professional life, everything is turning around that. Turhan just mentioned that there are lots of frameworks, best practices, I don't know, certification program. Everything is just telling us don't trust anything. You know what? We are talking about digital trust and zero trust because we tend to not to trust anyone, any systems, anything in the world because the natural systems is turning around that. If you just look at the cryptographic inflation around the world, all these very critical level of encryption models and cryptographies just based on natural effects like the prime numbers in the nature, like flowers, like the way the birds just flying. So it's just like that. This is just reflection. So this is normal. But maybe I can just say that AI is an ultimate stress test for any digital trust framework. Why? Because it challenges all the core pillars of trust: transparency, accountability, fairness, privacy, and security simultaneously and at scale. So maybe just I just can say, as I summarize everything from my perspective, by design is everything right now. Please create everything with by design mindset. I mean that security by design, privacy by design, ethic by design. You cannot embed anything about trust after you finish your design. Everything needs to be so homogeneous and just integrated into each other. So I think by design is everything right now. So new generation, these new people in our sector can do it perfectly. Because if we compare, people are 50s, people are at their 40s, at their 30s, it's just changing. This generation gap is really so big, and it's just happening very fast. In just 5 years, it's changing everything. And they've got perfect reflexes to understand the difference between systems. So by design is everything right now. So I cannot separate digital trust and AI. We cannot separate. AI is a reality in our life right now. And in the future, most probably, we will see lots of perfect enhancement with AI. Just one thing about that, these requirements signal one thing: AI trustworthiness isn't optional. It must be built in by design.
Great. Well, thank you very much. I think just like Mark mentioned, I was going to say about the ATM, right? So there are generational differences. So that's another thing we need to keep in mind as to how different generations use technology. That's one thing. But at the same time, from an organization, from a company perspective, that it is here. It's a reality. We cannot ignore it. It's just like any other technology that's going to serve us for the services and products we create, how we create value. So it's really good to keep that in mind. So I'd like to move forward with Ehram, and then have Mark kind of do a closing. So Ekram has been talking about these trust concepts, but how do you think this is kind of moving forward, and how it's going to evolve the digital trust over the next, say, 5 to 10 years? What are your thoughts?
Okay, 5 to 10 years for now is, let's say, a big prediction for the future. First of all, I would like to tell that. And regarding that question, I want to start where Onur has ended, actually. So digital trust is will be by design, okay? The evolvement, because it evolves as right now we are in Mark's Waymo example, I think is excellent that it is right now a differentiator, maybe for competition, okay? But in the future, it will become the core business requirement, as in electricity, as cybersecurity, and etc. But in my opinion, as the world and the world order is changing with politics, with geographies, with etc., I think there will be, from my perspective, there will be a concept like regional digital trust, okay? The security and zero trust principle will be global. We will have technical issues, cybersecurity measures. Let's think about an application. An application, it would be a bank or it would be a health application, which includes very critical information inside it. The access methods, cybersecurity issues, encryption, and those will be global. But digital trust side of it, how they are using our data, what kind of data we are sharing with them, how those ethical size and use of data are managed. Right now, as Onur mentioned, in US it's managed differently, in EU it's managed differently, in Turkey it's managed differently. They have, of course, convergence at some point, but they are different. That's why I think the zero trust and security measures is becoming much more global, but digital trust is becoming much more regional. So that this concept will make the evolved side of digital trust, and trust will be, as also Mark mentioned, we have to look at the state of digital trust survey each year from ISACA, because it shows us where is the gap and where the organization should go on. So right now, when we look at that, the trust is becoming much more metric. So in the future, it would be one of the, in my opinion, it would be one of the important concept in our ESG reports. Because right now we are talking about, let's say, carbon footprint and etc. But digital trust metric is also will be one of the major metrics for organizations because organizations is becoming much more digital. So to sum up, I think the definition just Mark has shown that the ISACA made with professionals in 3 days is very important because it includes all the counterparts. In the future, the additions will be made from regions to that to make it much more fancy. I always call the governance concept like that. We are taking global governance, but we are putting, for example, for Turkey, we are putting Turkish flavor on that. Okay. So every part of the world would put a flavor of their region for that digital trust side, but the basic concepts will be standard. Otherwise, the digitalization concept and the digital trust concept will not go as in the pace as AI evolves, as digitalization evolves. So, from my perspective, I can summarize like that. Thank you, Tolga.
Great. Well, thank you very much. So, yeah, that was a great summary, and we appreciate it. So, as we're getting close to our end, I'd like to close it with Mark. Mark, I'm going to kind of have you answer two questions in one.
You're putting me on the spot, huh?
I know, but you're the expert, like our other experts here. I would like you to kind of focus on, obviously there's a awareness growth, right? Just like AI is doing the same thing
Mhm.
about digital trust so much. And people talk about, making claims about digital trust without really meaning what it is and or actionable items. And so number one is how can organizations avoid? And we see this in the AI. They say, oh, we're AI native.
Yeah.
So regarding
Washing.
digital trust,
You're
yeah,
talking
washing.
about washing, right? Yeah. So,
Yeah, we want to address that trust washing. So that's one. How can organizations avoid this trust washing, making claims incorrectly, right, without meaning really actionable items? And second is, what do you think the one action that organizations could take tomorrow to significantly move in the digital trust direction or improve digital trust? A
you
two-part
got it.
question.
So, yep, I have no problems with the trust washing, and I'm going to give you my advice on my one comment, and I'd like for advice from the rest of this panel. I've actually learned a lot sitting in this panel. Let's talk trust washing here for a second. So, obviously, I talked to you about my father. My father said, "Hey, a handshake is all he needed to trust somebody. Today, this is the digital version of that handshake that my father used to tell me. He said, if they shake your hand and they don't look in your eye, don't trust them. It's a fake handshake. It was a really interesting conversation. So that's the whole idea is today, that's the modern equivalent of that handshake with somebody looking in your eye that says, count on me, you can trust me. Now, what's happening right now when we talk about trust washing is like greenwashing. Remember, the ESG drive, which I support, environmental and social governance, is we start to see a lot of organizations say, we're green, we support the environment. And you find out later on they're actually lying to you. They may not be knowingly lying to you, but they're saying something in their marketing materials that's not right. So you just can't put a recycling logo on your packaging and claim to be eco-friendly. In the same way, we care about digital trust. You can't just say, trust me, and I trust you, right? So that's kind of the whole thing. So credibility requires proof, not just spin. And so I just kind of put this down to one quote. Your actions should support your words. Leave it at that, right on that piece. Don't go to slogans unless you can support them. Your actions support your words. Digital trust is everyone's responsibility in an organization. And be very careful about your claims about trust. Everybody loves to throw trust into a slogan, into a logo or a slogan, just like they throw governance. And I loved Onur when she mentioned by design. We always love to say by design, But I have found that, oh, maybe 1 out of 4 times, nothing was done by design. We just say by design and we pretend like it actually took place. Okay. And again, that's a negative outlook, but it's true. It's based on my data. So let's go to kind of some things that I would say that I would look for. So if you look at digital trust today, this is like what cybersecurity was 15 years ago. Think about it, right? Everybody's freaking out about all these different things. Back then, security was an IT issue. Now it's a boardroom issue. Right now, we're talking about digital trust as it's a security issue, it's a privacy issue. Nope. I tell you what, I think I've mentioned this before. I'm an advisor to 13 boards across the world. And out of those 13 boards, 12 of those boards are talking about digital trust. What do we need to do to make sure people trust us? We think we've got security understood because, of course, security is always one of those things that we're not quite sure. But we've got privacy understood. We're passing our audits. How do we make sure that people aren't packing their bags and they're actually walking out on us? So I would say that a couple things real quick, and I'll finish up, is assign ownership. I'm not telling you you need to have a digital trust committee. I'm not telling you to create a digital trust, a chief digital trust officer. Quite frankly, I think that every time our industry has a new issue, we create a chief for that role, and we're creating more chiefs than we are people who actually do the work, right? So I think this could be a committee type of exercise, and it should be treated as an outcome. And look at those digital trust gaps. Look at how you interact with your consumers and your customers, and what are the digital interactions, and how do we reduce that friction? And oh, by the way, when we have an incident like Marriott did, this is the reason I still like Marriott. I liked how they treated me as a victim. They said, here are your rights and here are your options. When I got nailed by Target, they said, sorry about that. You know what I mean? It's a whole different story because you know what? Even the strongest castles can still be invaded, and I think a lot of people are too arrogant about that, and they wait until they make the front page of the news before they finally actually do something. Yeah, think about some of the major things that we've talked about here on this. So look at your metrics. These aren't digital trust. These aren't new metrics, right? These are my customers staying with me? Do my customers want to still work with me? Do my customers trust me? It's nothing new. And I posted this on LinkedIn about a week ago. I had a client say, "Oh, we don't have the budget for adopting digital trust." I'm like, what's the budget you need? Right? What is the budget you need for this? Because you're doing basic business things that require your customers to trust you. I'm not sure there's a budget item that actually helps you do this. It's cross-functional. It's a mindset. And that's my biggest concern is everybody looks at this as a budget item. It's not. It's a mindset that needs to be changed, and it costs zero, right? Literally, if you truly understand the idea of digital trust, it costs you zero, other than maybe some training, right? To go to Tall Guy's digital trust ecosystem framework class, that would cost you not much, but it would still cost you a little bit. But that's my point. I'm interested in anybody else's views on that.
Great. Um, we're almost out of time, but if you have any closing comments, more than happy to hear. But one thing I think Mark mentioned, or maybe Ekram, we started this, right? This is an evolution. So the earlier that you start, like just the cybersecurity example back in the 2010s, 2000s, look where we are now, right? So I just put something. We have this saying, right? Erken kalkan çok yol alır. So it's the time is right now. We know this is coming. Just imagine where you'll be in 10 years or where you want to be in 10 years. So start now so that you'll, go through all the way and, competitive environment and ahead of your competitors and whatever that means for your organization. Well, I really appreciate the discussion. I don't see any questions, but we're hoping to continue these series and sessions with global speakers, panelists. Let us know if you have any feedback, value. You can reach out to our Istanbul chapter through different means. But we really appreciate the participation. Great speakers, great panelists, great topics. Hoping to see you in our next session when we announce it. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Thank
Herkese
you.
iyi geceler.
I learned a lot today from these experts. Thank you for having me.
Bye bye.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Onur, görüşürüz.
Thanks everyone. I am
Görüşürüz.
closing the session.
Teşekkürler davet
Bye.
ettiğiniz için.
Kendinize iyi bakın. Görüşürüz.
Hoşça kal. Nice to meet you, Mark.
Görüşürüz.
Hey, nice to
See
meet
you
you.
hopefully. Hopefully.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right.
Bye
Thank
bye
you.
bye bye.
Bye bye.
Bye-bye.